This was their first day of all school mass, so they have mass once a week on Wednesdays. And basically the way that it's set up is children and staff, they sit on the right side of the church. Then parents and other visitors who are just dropping in for mass, they sit on the left side. Mass is for an hour, and I guess it sounds like this happened at around 8:20, and the mass starts at around 8.
All right, let's bring in former NYPD Lieutenant Darrin Porcher for your thoughts on what we know so far. Hi, Darrin.
This is a challenging narrative, to say the least. The one thing that we do know is the shooting began in the parking lot, which is quite similar to several school shootings that we've seen in the past. So it begs the question as to, should we have a standing police, or I should say armed presence, outside of that school/church, which is apparent that that's something that we should have had. And, you know, it really rings volumes in that the shooter was firing through an opaque glass, which was the stained glass in the church. In essence, they created a target-rich environment to shoot as many people as possible. And then when we speak to the state of Minnesota, you need to be 21 years of age to acquire a handgun. So the handgun was clearly acquired illegally. So it begs the question as to, how was the shooter able to acquire this handgun in the state of Minnesota, which prohibits purchasing that firearm under the age of 21.
Something we'll also be curious when we get our next update from the police chief is any record of any previous record, criminal record, that is, of the shooter. It was made clear in the news conference that they didn't seem to find anything, but as we discussed earlier, perhaps there was a juvenile record. There could have been, that we wouldn't know about. What did you make of that in the news conference?
I understood that, but I think what's more telling was a manifesto in play, and has law enforcement not provided this manifesto, which I can understand because this is an ongoing investigation. We're not looking to put someone in jail because a shooter has already committed suicide, but at the same token, we're looking to extract the teachable moments which would greater fortify that school, or any other school for that matter, as we move forward. So in terms of it being a criminal background, I just don't think it's something that's significant. But I am concerned with, is there a possible psychological dysfunction in the background in the shooter, which would be quite telling if the shooter sat down with a therapist, and the therapist was understanding that this was an individual with volatile tendencies that should have been checked appropriately.
Darrin, obviously the start of a new school year. You've got to imagine schools all over the country right now are looking at, assessing, possibly reassessing their security measures. What can be learned from this?
You know, what's interesting about this being a religious organization of education, these traditionally don't happen here. Granted, in the past, we had the instance that occurred in Tennessee, but by and large, these types of shootings occur in public schools. And so the parents that have kids that go to this school probably figured, hey, look, you know what, this is a safe environment. I'm sending my children to a Christian school, so they're not going to be online what normally happens in a public school, and something like this happened. It was an aberration, but at the same token, we're going to have an after-action review that provides us the teachable moments how to best fortify that school. One component would be drones. Understand, the Archdiocese does not have the money that the public school system has. So they're somewhat limited in terms of the resources that they can introduce for security. But at the same token, this bears to be a necessity, not a nicety. So we need to move forward with the appropriate fortifications, such as drones, an armed security officer that would be outside of the school. Because when we saw what happened in Parkland as well as Uvalde, we had a shooter that began shooting from outside as they approached the building. So these are things that need to come into the mind of the individuals that are creating the security matrix in the school to ensure the safety of those children that will be attending the school in the future.
Darrin, the live shot we have up is still outside of the school. You can see the police tape and the police activity, of course, the FBI on scene. Just a moment ago, while you were talking, we had a shot up for a brief moment outside of the shooter's home. We did lose that shot. We'll try to get it back up again. But what we did see was police activity, quite a bit of activity outside the shooter's home. You would assume they're in there now. And just to remind everybody, the details of the shooter that we know so far, law enforcement officials are confirming to Fox News the two names of the shooter that have been used in the past, Robin Westman and Robert Westman. The officials saying that the shooter may have used both names, but they are now at the home of the shooter, Darrin. How will they conduct their investigation in the home, Darrin?
Well, one of the commonplace issues or pathways would be to establish the digital footprint, which your guests have come on and spoke to in the past as it relates to social media, computers, and the cell phone. That's going to be quite telling as to why was there any indicators that were emitted from the shooter prior to the shooting. Secondly, we really want to drill down to, as I mentioned in the earlier part, the manifesto, because this is not someone that had a tremendous criminal background. I genuinely believe that this was a statement as to why they committed this horrific act. In addition to that, we want to also find out, was this shooter either a student? What was the connective tissue with the shooter and this school? And that remains to be the million-dollar question as to why the shooter selected this specific premise as it resulted in this horrific carnage that we're speaking to today.
We know that those victims are still in the hospital and getting the care that they need. We hope we get an update on them shortly. Checking again, none right now, but hopefully soon. Darrin, thank you for joining us on that.